Hey, welcome back to Michael Tells. Grab something warm, get comfortable. This one's a slow burn. Today's story is about the strangest kind of reunion. The kind where someone from your past walks straight into your present, into your workplace, and has absolutely no idea who you are. But you know exactly who they are. It's about an old humiliation, a second chance you never asked for, and one small word that followed a man around for 22 years. I'm not going to say too much. I'd rather you feel it the way I did the first time. So sit back, let the voice take you in, and stay till the end. Trust me on this one. Here's the story.
Okay, so I want to tell you about the afternoon I stood in my own clinic with my thumb pressed into the exact spot between a woman's shoulder blades, the spot where all her tension lived, and for about one full second, one real second, I thought about pressing harder. Not to help her, to hurt her, just a little, just enough. And the thing is, I'm a professional. I've had my hands on maybe 8,000 backs in 12 years. I don't do that. I have never once done that. But that afternoon, with the blinds half down and the radiator ticking in the corner, I had my hands on the one person in the world I'd spent 22 years quietly hating. And I stood there and I thought, nobody would ever know. Let me back up. I should back up, because if I just tell you the middle, it sounds insane. My name's Damien Lefebvre. I'm a physio. In France, we say kinésithérapeute, a kiné. And I've got a small practice in Nantes. 2 treatment rooms, a second-hand ultrasound machine I paid off over 3 years, a fern that somehow refuses to die. I'm 38, I'm divorced. I have a daughter, Manon, she's 9, and I get her every other weekend and half the holidays. And honestly, those weekends are the only time my apartment feels like anything other than a place I sleep. I tell you all that so you understand. I'm not a dramatic person. I'm the guy who reads the instruction manual. I label things. My ex-wife used to say living with me was like living with a very kind traffic light. She wasn't being cruel. She was just tired. So was I. But I wasn't always like that. And to explain the woman who walked into my clinic, I have to take you back to a town called Cholet. You probably don't know Cholet unless you're French, and even then, maybe not. It's a small city down in the Maine-et-Loire, textile country, handkerchiefs and rain. Grey stone, grey sky, everybody's dad worked at the same 3 factories. My family didn't have money. I mean, we had enough, we ate, we had the heat on mostly, but I wore my cousin's old coats and my sneakers were always one specific brand off from the brand that mattered, and at 16, in a lycée, that one specific brand off is the difference between a person and a target. I was shy. I stammered a little when I got nervous, which was often. I read a lot. I wrote things down in a notebook I kept in the inside pocket of that cousin's coat, and I would have died, genuinely died, if anyone had ever read what was in it. And then there was Laetitia. Laetitia Berger, God. Even saying the name does something to my stomach after all these years. She was the girl. Every school has one. The one who moved through the courtyard like the courtyard was built for her. Confident in a way that, at 16, looks like magic. And at 38, you understand, is mostly just a good family photograph. Good teeth, good clothes, a mother who knew how to do things. The boys were stupid around her, and the girls organized themselves around her, like iron filings around a magnet. And I was gone. Completely. The kind of gone where you rearrange your whole day around the 90 seconds you might pass her by the vending machines. I never spoke to her. Not once. Not really. I was furniture to her. And I told myself that was fine. That furniture at least gets to be in the room. And then, in the spring, I did the single bravest and stupidest thing I did in my entire adolescence. I wrote her a letter. Not a note, a letter. 2 pages, both sides, in my careful handwriting, poured out of that notebook. I told her I watched her. I told her she made the grey days feel less grey. And this is the part that ruined me. I wrote this one line, this earnest, 16-year-old, please God let me forget it line. I wrote, "You have the kind of laugh that could melt November." Melt November. I thought it was beautiful. I really did. I read it back to myself and I thought, this is the truest thing I have ever written. I folded it into 4 and I slid it into the side pocket of her bag when she left it on the bench during gym. And then I went home and I threw up from nerves and I waited. 3 days. For 3 days nothing happened and I lived in this agony of hope. And then, on the 4th day, at lunch, in the courtyard, la cour, the big open yard where everybody stood in their little kingdoms, she took it out. I saw her take it out and my whole body went cold, because I understood in that second that I had made a catastrophic error. She was laughing before she even started reading, her friends leaning in, and she read it out loud, in a voice, in this high, mocking, sing-song voice, doing the shy, stammering poor kid, and she got to my line, and she pressed her hand to her chest and she cried out, "You have the kind of laugh that could melt November," and the whole yard came apart laughing. And that was it. That was the thing that decided the next 2 years of my life. Because it didn't stop that day. It became a chant. For the rest of the lycée, whenever I walked past a group, someone would go, "November," just that, "November," and they'd all crack up, in the halls, in the changing rooms, written on my locker in marker, "November," my own private weather. I stopped writing in the notebook. I stopped writing anything for about 10 years. I stopped raising my hand. I built the walls I still leave behind. Honestly, I built them that spring, brick by brick. And I got very good at being furniture, at being the kind traffic light, at being someone you could not humiliate, because there was nothing sticking out far enough to grab. My parents split the following year, and my dad got work near Nantes, and I went with him. And I was so relieved to leave Cholet, I could have wept. New school, nobody knew, November. I kept my head down, I got decent grades. I discovered that if you put your hands on a strained muscle in the right way, people are grateful to you and they don't laugh. And I thought, that. I'll do that for a living. Hands, helping, no performance required. And I built a life. A quiet, careful, load-bearing life. And I did not think about Laetitia Berger every day. I want to be clear. I'm not a man who nursed a shrine, but I'll tell you the truth. Every few months, out of nowhere, changing a light bulb, sitting in traffic, that voice would come back. Melt November. And my ears would go hot like I was 16, 22 years later. That's what that kind of thing does. It doesn't sit on the surface. It gets down into the foundation and it stays.
Everybody's got a November. Some small, stupid moment from years ago that still makes your ears go hot when it sneaks up on you. Be honest. What's yours? Drop it in the comments. And then stay with me, because this is where it turns.
Okay, now the clinic. It was a Tuesday in November. I know, I didn't plan that. Life just has a sense of humor. And my secretary, Farida, she does my scheduling, She'd taken on a new patient for the 4 o'clock. Post-surgical rehab, referred by an oncologist. On my screen, the name was Laetitia Vasseur. Vasseur. Meant nothing to me. Laetitia is a common enough name for women around my age. It didn't even flicker. I read the referral. I remember thinking, right, auxiliary work, careful, gentle. This would be someone who needs patience. And I got my room ready, and I called the name into the waiting room the way I've called 10,000 names. And she stood up. And I knew her. Instantly. Before my brain caught up, my body knew. The ears went hot, 22 years, gone, snap, like that. Older, yes. Thinner than I remembered, tired around the eyes, a scarf tied over hair that was growing back in this soft, uneven way I'd learned the reason for. But it was her. It was absolutely, unmistakably her. Laetitia Berger, married name Vasseur, standing in my waiting room in Nantes, holding a folder against her chest like a shield. And here's the part I'm not proud of. She didn't recognize me. Not even a little. She looked right at me, at the man in the white tunic holding a file, and she gave me the polite, slightly nervous smile of a patient. Nothing. I had changed, I suppose. The glasses were gone, I'd filled out, I stood differently. To her, I was just the physio. Furniture again. And something in me went very, very still. I brought her into the room. I closed the door. And I want you to understand what was happening inside me while my hands and my voice did all the normal things. Have a seat. Tell me what's been going on. Any pain when you lift the arm? Because inside it was chaos. It was carnival. There was a 16-year-old boy in there screaming, "She's on your table. She's on your table. You have her." And there was another voice, older, colder, saying, "You could make this appointment miserable, and she would never even know why. You could be a fraction too rough, a degree too clinical. You could let her feel small in a room where she has no power at all." And she made it so easy. Because she was scared. She was so clearly scared. She got up onto the table and she started to explain her surgery, and her voice, the voice that melted my whole adolescence, it shook. She'd had an operation, lymph nodes removed under the arm. The shoulder had frozen up the way they do, and she couldn't lift her arm above her head, couldn't reach a shelf, couldn't fasten things behind her back, and she said, "I feel like my own body has locked me out." And I laid her forward, and I put my hands on her back, on that spot between the shoulder blades where all of it had gathered. 22 years of her poise had apparently ended up right there in a knot the size of a plum. And that was the second. That's the one full second I told you about. Thumb on the spot. Nobody would know.
I have to stop and ask you straight. If those were your hands, the one person who broke something in you, lying right there, crusting you, and nobody would ever know, what would you do? Don't answer fast. Sit with it. Because what he does next surprised even me.
And then I saw the scar. When I'd moved the gown to walk the shoulder, I saw the line of it, healing, along the side, under the arm, the small tattooed dots they use to aim the radiation. And I saw the way she flinched, not from pain, from being seen. And something in me just put the boy down, set him on the floor. Because I have put my hands on hundreds of people carrying that exact scar, and I know what it costs to lie down in front of a stranger and let them touch the place where your life nearly ended. And I could not. I physically could not turn that into a weapon. Whatever she'd done at 16, she was 40 now, and she was frightened, and she was mine to help. So I held her. I did my job. I warmed the tissue. I found the range. I talked her through it in the low, steady voice I use. Breathe out on the stretch. Good. We're not forcing anything. Your body is allowed to go slow. And by the end of the hour, she got her arm up maybe 15 degrees higher than she'd come in, and she looked at that in the mirror like I'd performed a miracle. And she said, "Thank you, really. I didn't think anyone could." And she stopped, and her eyes filled, and she laughed at herself and wiped them, and I thought, that's it. She'll book with Farida, she'll come back Thursday, she'll never know, and I will simply carry this. I'm good at carrying things. She got to the door. She had her coat half on, and she turned around and she said, "Can I ask you something strange?" I said, "Sure." And she said, "Did you grow up in Cholet?" And the room got very quiet. And I said, "Because I'm too tired to lie anymore. At 38, I've run out of the energy lying takes." I said, "Yeah, I did. I went to the lycée there until I was 17. And she said my name. Not Vasseur, not Monsieur Lefebvre. She said, "Damien." Soft. Like a question and an apology at the same time. "Damien Lefebvre." "You remembered," I said. And I didn't know if I meant it as a wonder or an accusation, and honestly, neither did she. And she came back and she sat down in the patient chair, coat still half on, and she put her hands over her face and she said, "I've been trying to find the courage to find you for 2 years, since I got sick. I make lists of things I did that I need to..." And then my oncologist said I'd need physio, months of it. And I went through the clinics here in Nantes, and your name came up. Your photo. I wasn't sure. I booked the appointment half hoping it wasn't you, so I wouldn't have to. And then she said the thing that took the floor out from under me. She reached into her bag, the same gesture, God, the exact same gesture as the bag on the bench 22 years ago. And she took out a folded piece of paper, old paper, soft at the creases from being folded and unfolded. And she held it out and she said, "I never threw it away." It was my letter. It was my letter. 2 pages, both sides, my careful 16-year-old handwriting. "You have the kind of laugh that could melt November." She'd kept it for 22 years, through school, through university, through a marriage, through a divorce, she mentioned later, through moving cities 4 times, through cancer. She'd kept my letter.
22 years. She kept that letter for 22 years. And that's the moment this flipped for me. The person he'd spent all this time hating was carrying it just as heavy as he was. Keep that in mind for what she says next.
And I said, I could barely get it out. I said, "You read it to the whole yard. You made it a joke. They called me November for 2 years. Why would you keep it?" And she cried, not prettily, the real kind. And she told me. She told me about her mother, crowned some regional beauty thing back in the 70s and furious for the rest of her life that the crown expired. She turned Laetitia into the redo, the do it right this time. Weighed her food, picked her friends by their families. "I was scared all the time," she said. "You have no idea. I looked like the girl who had everything, and I spent every single day terrified they'd find out I was just a frightened kid whose mother measured her wrists." And then this letter appears in a bag, from the quiet boy in the wrong sneakers, the furniture. And it was, she said, it was the only thing anyone had ever written to me that wasn't about the outside. You saw the gray days. You saw that I might have gray days. Nobody had ever... And she couldn't finish. and she read it 40 times in her room, and she decided to keep it forever. And then, 2 days later, her boyfriend at the time, older, one of the loud ones, he went through a bag looking for cigarettes and he found it. And he read the first line out in front of everyone and started to laugh. And she said, in that half second, she saw her whole life fork. She could defend me, the poor kid, the target, and become a target herself, lose the ledge, prove her mother right. Or she could get there first, be louder, be crueler, perform the mockery so hard that nobody would ever suspect the letter had meant anything to her at all. So I did me doing you, she said. I did the cruelest version. And it worked. It always works. That's the horror of it. And I went home and I smoothed out the paper and I hid it in a book. And I have hated myself about you specifically for 22 years. I turned the kindest thing anyone ever did for me into the worst thing I ever did to anyone. And I did it in about 4 seconds, in the yard. Because I was a coward and I was 16 and I was so scared. And I sat there in my own clinic with the radiator ticking and my hand still warm from her back, and I felt the strangest thing drain out of me. It was the anger. 22 years of it. I'd built a whole, quiet, careful architecture on top of that anger. The walls, the labels, the traffic light, and here was the woman I'd built it against. Bald under a scarf, telling me the monster I'd been hating was a frightened girl whose mother measured her wrists, and I couldn't hold it anymore. There was nothing left to hold it against. I didn't forgive her right away. I want to be honest about that too, because these stories always tie the bow too fast, and I don't trust bows. I said, "You really hurt me. That thing shaped me. I stopped writing for 10 years. I still hear it. I heard it in this room an hour ago when my thumb was on your spine." And she flinched at that, at how close I let her see I'd come. And she said, I know it did. I'm not asking you to make it not have happened. I'm running a race against my own body, and I wanted, before, to give you your letter back and tell you that it mattered, that you weren't stupid to write it. You were the only one telling the truth in that whole courtyard. You were the only one telling the truth in that whole courtyard. I've thought about that line every day since. So, what happened? You want to know if we fell in love? No, this isn't that. That would be another kind of lie, the pretty kind, and she and I had both had enough of pretty lies to last us. She's a patient, I'm her kiné. That's the shape it took, and that's the right shape. But she came back Thursday, and the Thursday after. 10 weeks of rehab, and week by week that arm came up. Over her head, behind her back, the shelf, the bra strap, all the small, enormous things, and we talked. About Cholet, about our mother who died still angry, about my daughter, about the divorce, hers and mine, the way two careful people can just quietly not make it. And it was the first real human connection I'd let myself have in years. And it started from the absolute bottom, from the worst thing, from November, and grew up out of that instead of being planted in nice soil and dying anyway. Her scan in the spring was clear. She cried in my treatment room, the good kind that time, and I held onto her good shoulder and I did not say anything clever. I just let her. And the letter? She wanted me to have it back. And I held it. My own handwriting, that terrible, wonderful line. And I want to tell you that I read it and I felt shame. The old, hot shame. But I didn't. I read, "You have the kind of laugh that could melt November. and for the first time in 22 years, I didn't cringe at that boy. I felt tender toward him. He wasn't stupid. He was the only one telling the truth in the whole courtyard. He just told it too early, to someone too frightened to catch it. I keep it in the drawer of my desk now at the clinic. Not framed, that'd be strange, just in the drawer. And every so often, changing a light bulb, sitting in traffic, I still hear the chant, November, November, because a thing like that never fully leaves the foundation. But now, when I hear it, I hear the rest of it too. I hear a scared girl in a courtyard making the worst 4-second decision of her life to save herself. I hear a bold woman in a scarf handing back a folded piece of paper. I hear my own kid voice, honest and unashamed, saying a true thing out loud into a crowd that wasn't ready for it. And I don't feel haunted by it anymore. It's just weather. It passes. A name still in my Thursday book. I check the schedule in the mornings the way I always have. And for the first time in a very long time, there's a name on there I'm actually glad to see. Melt November. Yeah, I think eventually it did.
That's where I'll leave it. No fairy tale, no revenge. Just two people finally telling the truth. So one last question. If the person who hurt you most showed up needing your help, could you do what he did? Tell me below. And there's another story waiting right here.